The rain on Tessara Prime was warm and gentle. It fell on the purple forests and the silver lakes. It fell on the beautiful cities that the Valori had built over thousands of years. And it fell on the broken bodies of the Valori people who lay dead in the streets. Elder Priest Tomo stood at the window of the ancient temple and watched the Kreth soldiers march through his city. They were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms. Their eyes were cold and empty. They carried weapons that could turn a Valori into ash with one shot. The Kreth had come to Tessara Prime 3 generations ago. Tomo's grandfather had been a young man when the first Kreth ships appeared in the sky. The Valori had no weapons. They had never needed them. They were a peaceful people who ate plants and made beautiful art and sang songs under the twin moons. The Kreth did not care about art or songs. They wanted the rare minerals beneath the Valori soil. They wanted slaves to dig those minerals out of the ground. And they wanted to show the galaxy what happened to species that could not defend themselves. Tomo closed his eyes and listened to the screams outside. Tomorrow, the Kreth commander would execute 1,000 Valori hostages. It was punishment because some young Valori had tried to fight back. They had thrown rocks at Kreth soldiers. Rocks against plasma rifles. It was brave and stupid, and now 1,000 people would die. The old priest walked slowly down the stone stairs beneath the temple. Very few Valori knew these stairs existed. Very few knew about the chamber at the bottom. It was forbidden knowledge, passed from elder priest to elder priest for 10,000 years. The chamber was small and dark. Tomo lit a candle with shaking hands. In the center of the room sat an object that did not belong on this world. It was made of metal that never rusted. It was covered in symbols that no Valori could read. It was older than the temple, older than the Valori civilization, perhaps older than Tessara Prime itself. Tomo's grandfather had shown him this object when he was young. His grandfather had told him the legend. Long ago, before the Valori existed, there was a species so powerful and so dangerous that the ancient rulers of the galaxy had hidden them away. They had erased all records of this species. They had sealed them in a distant corner of space and made everyone forget they existed. The legend called them the Sleeping Warriors. The object in the chamber was a beacon. It could send a signal to the Sleeping Warriors and ask for their help. But the legend also said that the Sleeping Warriors might be worse than any enemy. They might come and destroy everything. They might be monsters. Tomo looked at the beacon for a long time. He thought about the 1,000 people who would die tomorrow. He thought about the 3 generations of suffering. He thought about the children who had never known freedom. Then he placed his hand on the beacon and spoke the ancient words that his grandfather had taught him. The beacon began to glow. It made a sound like distant thunder. Tomo felt something pass through him, something that moved faster than light, something that reached across the galaxy in an instant. Then the beacon went dark and silent. Tomo sat in the darkness for a long time. He felt foolish. The Sleeping Warriors were just a legend. No one was coming to help. No one ever came to help. That was the way of the galaxy. The strong took from the weak, and the weak died quietly. He climbed the stairs and returned to his window. The rain had stopped. The Kreth soldiers were still marching. Tomorrow, 1,000 Valori would die, and nothing would change. Far across the galaxy, in a spiral arm that appeared on no star maps, something very old and very patient detected the signal. Admiral Yuna was drinking tea in her office when the alert came. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had served in the United Earth Defense Force for 40 years. She had fought in the Mars Rebellion and the Europa Crisis. She had watched humanity nearly destroy itself and then slowly, painfully, learn to be better. Now she commanded the first fleet from the orbital station above Earth. It was a boring job. There was no one to fight Humanity had achieved peace with itself 200 years ago. They had built a civilization among the stars. They had ships and weapons that could shatter moons. And they had nothing to do with them. Yuna looked at the signal on her display. It was old. The encoding was ancient, using methods that predated most known civilizations. But the message was clear. Please, anyone, help us. Yuna felt something stir in her chest. It was a feeling she had not experienced in decades. It was purpose. She made 3 calls. The first was to Admiral Ji-hoon, commander of Earth's defense grid. The second was to General Sumi, head of the Marine Corps. The third was to President Taiwu himself. 6 hours later, the United Earth Council held an emergency session. The debate was short. Humanity had spent 400 years building the most powerful military force in their history. They had told themselves it was for defense. They had told themselves it was to make sure they never faced extinction again. But deep down, they all knew the truth. They had been waiting for a reason, waiting for someone to need them. President Taiwu stood before the council and spoke the words that would change galactic history. Someone has asked for our help. We do not know who they are. We do not know what they face. But we know what we must do. The First Fleet will answer this call. And if anyone has harmed these people, they will learn what happens when you hurt someone under humanity's protection. The vote was unanimous. 12 hours later, 73 warships began spinning up their jump drives. Captain Dahi stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Unyielding Dawn and watched the stars blur around her. She was young for a captain, only 35 years old. She had never seen real combat. None of them had. But she had trained her whole life for this moment. They all had. Beside her stood Lieutenant Minji, the ship's cultural officer. Minji was nervous. She had studied 1,000 alien languages that humanity had intercepted over the centuries. She had prepared first contact protocols for every possible scenario. But nothing had prepared her for the reality of actually meeting another species. What do you think they will be like? Minji asked. Dahi considered the question. Scared, probably. Anyone who sends a message like that is desperate. They have no one else to turn to. And what if they are afraid of us? Dahi smiled. It was not a happy smile. Then we will have to show them that they do not need to be. The fleet jumped. 73 ships carrying 50,000 humans crossed half the galaxy in an instant. They were not conquerors. They were not invaders. They were something the galaxy had forgotten could exist. They were rescuers. And they were coming. The morning of the execution was bright and clear. The twin suns of Tessara Prime rose over the mountains and painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. It was a beautiful morning. It was a terrible morning. 1,000 Valori stood in the central square of the capital city. They were bound with energy chains that burned their skin. They were surrounded by Kreth soldiers with weapons ready. They were waiting to die. Elder Priest Tomo stood among the crowd of Valori who had been forced to watch. The Kreth wanted everyone to see what happened to those who resisted. They wanted the Valori to understand that hope was foolish. That resistance was death. Commander Krethna stood on a raised platform above the prisoners. He was the leader of the occupation force, and he enjoyed his work. He had crushed 12 species before the Valori. He would crush 12 more after them. Let this be a lesson, he announced, his voice amplified across the square. The Kreth Dominion is eternal. The Kreth Dominion is absolute. Those who stand against us will fall. Those who... He stopped speaking. Every Kreth soldier in the square looked up at the same moment. Their communication devices were screaming. Something was happening in orbit. Something impossible. Tomo looked up at the sky. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then he saw the stars disappear. One by one, They winked out of existence as something massive moved in front of them. Ships. Dozens of ships. Ships larger than anything he had ever seen. The sky tore open with light. It was not the gentle light of fold space that galactic civilizations used. It was harsh and violent, like reality itself was being forced apart. Ships emerged from the tear in space, and they were not like any ships Tomo had ever imagined. Galactic vessels were smooth and curved, designed for beauty as much as function. These ships were different. They were angular and brutal. They were covered in weapons. They looked like they had been built for one purpose only: war. The largest ship was at the center of the formation. It was black and gray, with the image of a planet painted on its hull. A blue and green planet with white clouds. Earth. Commander Krethener recovered quickly. He was a veteran of many battles. He had faced challenges before. Unknown vessels, he broadcast on all frequencies. You have entered Kreth Dominion space. Identify yourselves immediately or face destruction. There was a long pause. Then a voice came back. It was calm and clear, translated into the common galactic language. This is Captain Dohi of the United Earth Defense Force vessel Unyielding Dawn. We received a distress signal from this world. We are here to respond. Krethener laughed. He actually laughed. United Earth? He had never heard of such a civilization. They were probably some minor species from an uncharted region, playing at being important. You are outnumbered, Krethener said. My fleet has 3 ships for every one of yours. Leave now, and we will allow you to live. Another pause. When Captain Dohi spoke again, her voice had not changed at all. The people on that planet are in danger. We are here to help them. If you stand in our way, you will regret it. This is your only warning. In the square, Tomo felt his heart beating fast. The beacon had worked. Someone had come. But would they be enough? The Kreth were powerful. The Kreth were cruel. The Kreth always won. Krethener gave the order to attack. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Kreth plasma cannons fired at the human ships. The shots hit their targets. They did nothing. Human ships had armor made from materials the Kreth had never encountered. Their shields operated on principles that defied galactic science. Then the humans fired back. They did not use elegant plasma weapons or precision laser arrays. They used kinetic accelerators that launched chunks of metal at incredible speeds. They used nuclear missiles that exploded with the fire of captured suns. They used everything they had, and they used it without mercy. Captain Dohi stood on the bridge of the Unyielding Dawn and watched the battle unfold. Her crew worked in perfect silence, each person doing their job without hesitation. They had trained for this. They had been born for this. Target the command ships first, she ordered. Protect the civilian vessels. Do not let anyone escape to bring reinforcements. Lieutenant Minji watched the tactical display with wide eyes. She had studied war in books and simulations. She had never seen it in reality. They are breaking formation, Minji reported. The Kreth ships are trying to retreat. They will not succeed, Dahi said quietly. We do not leave enemies behind us. Not when there are innocent people below. On the surface, the Valori watched in disbelief as Kreth ships fell from the sky. They came down like burning stars, trailing fire and smoke. They crashed into the purple forests and the silver lakes. They crashed far from the cities because the human gunners were careful. Even in the chaos of battle, they protected the people below. The battle lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, every Kreth ship in orbit was destroyed or disabled. The occupation force was cut off from the Dominion. They were alone. Commander Krethener stood frozen on his platform. His communication device was silent. His fleet was gone. His power was gone. For the first time in his life, he did not know what to do. Then the human dropships came. They descended through the atmosphere in tight formation. They were ugly, blocky things, designed for function and not beauty. They landed in the square with a thunder of engines, blowing dust and debris in all directions. The doors opened. Human soldiers poured out, moving with speed and precision. They wore armor that covered their entire bodies. They carried weapons that looked primitive but deadly. They surrounded the Kreth soldiers before anyone could react. One soldier walked forward. He was young, maybe 20 years old in human time. He had a kind face despite his armor and weapons. He removed his helmet so the Valori could see him. His name was Junho. "Everyone stay calm," he said in careful, translated words. "We are here to help. No one else needs to get hurt today." The Kreth soldiers looked at each other. They still had their weapons. They still outnumbered the humans on the ground. Perhaps they could fight. Junho seemed to read their thoughts. He smiled, and it was not a threatening smile. It was almost sad. "You can try to fight," he said. "But my friends up there just destroyed your entire fleet in 11 minutes. Do you really want to test us?" The Kreth soldiers dropped their weapons. Elder Priest Tomo pushed through the crowd. His old legs were shaking. His heart was pounding. He had summoned monsters from legend, and instead, angels had arrived. He fell to his knees before Junho. This was what the Valori did when they met new masters. This was what they had learned over 3 generations of slavery. Junho looked uncomfortable. He reached down and gently helped Tomo stand up. "Please do not kneel," Junho said. "You do not need to kneel to us. We are not your rulers. We are just here to help. That is all." Tomo stared at him. He did not understand. No species in the galaxy helped without demanding something. There was always a price. There was always a catch. "What do you want from us?" Tomo asked. Junho looked back at his fellow soldiers. They seemed equally confused by the question. "We want to make sure you are safe," Junho said finally. "We want to free your people from those chains. We want to help you rebuild. After that, we will go home. Unless you want us to stay." Tomo began to cry. He was an old man who had seen too much death and suffering. He had forgotten that kindness existed. He had forgotten that anyone could care about strangers. But these strange creatures from across the galaxy had come when he called. They had fought for people they had never met. They asked for nothing in return. The Valori children gathered around the human soldiers, curious and unafraid. Sergeant Hana, a fierce woman with gentle eyes, let them touch her armor and examine her equipment. She answered their questions with patience and warmth. High above, Captain Dolhi looked down at the planet and allowed herself a small smile. They had done it. They had saved someone. After 400 years of waiting, humanity had finally found its purpose. But she knew this was only the beginning. The Kreth would not forget this defeat. They would come back with more ships and more soldiers. They would want revenge, and humanity would be waiting for them. On the unyielding dawn, Admiral Yuna studied the reports from the surface. The Valori were safe for now. The Kreth occupation force was contained. The mission was a success. But she knew the truth. The galaxy was vast and dangerous. There were more species like the Kreth out there. There were more people like the Valori, suffering and alone. And now they knew that someone would answer if they called. Yuna began composing a message to Earth. They would need more ships, more soldiers, more resources. The galaxy was about to learn what it meant to have humanity as a neighbor. The news of Tessara Prime spread across the galaxy like fire. Every species with access to communications learned what had happened. An unknown civilization had appeared from nowhere. They had destroyed an entire Kreth fleet. They had freed a conquered world, and they had asked for nothing in return, in the great halls of the Kreth Dominion. Overlord Vethrak listened to the reports with growing fury. He was the supreme commander of all Kreth forces. He had conquered more worlds than any other leader in Dominion history. He had never known defeat. Who are these humans? He demanded. Where did they come from? His advisors had no answers. They searched every database and every archive. They found nothing. The humans were not in any galactic record. It was as if they had appeared from empty space. It does not matter who they are, Vethrak finally said. They have challenged the Dominion. They have destroyed our ships and killed our soldiers. They must be crushed. He gave the order to mobilize the Grand Fleet. 2,000 warships from across the Dominion would gather at the staging point. It was the largest military force the Kreth had ever assembled. It was enough power to destroy entire star systems. The humans had brought 70 ships. The Kreth would bring 2,000. There would be no mercy. On Tessara Prime, life was slowly returning to normal. The Valori emerged from hiding. They began to rebuild their damaged cities. They buried their dead and mourned their losses. But for the first time in 3 generations, they also began to hope. Admiral Yuna had come down to the surface to meet with the Valori Council. She sat in a simple wooden chair in the great hall of the temple, surrounded by the leaders of a people she had never known. Existed until a few days ago. Elder Priest Tomo translated between the species. Human and Valori languages were completely different, but they were learning to understand each other. I must ask you something, Tomo said carefully. Why did you come? We are strangers to you. We have nothing to offer you. Why would you risk your lives for us? Yuna considered the question. She had been asked the same thing by her own crew. She had asked it of herself. A long time ago, she began, my people nearly destroyed ourselves. We fought wars over land and resources and ideas. We killed each other by the millions. We came very close to extinction. The Valori listened with wide eyes. They could not imagine such violence. But we survived, Yuna continued. We learned from our mistakes. We built a new civilization based on cooperation and mutual protection. We decided that strength without purpose was worthless. That power meant nothing if you did not use it to help others. She paused and looked around the room at the Valori faces. When we received your signal, we did not know who you were or what you faced. But we knew you were in trouble. We knew you needed help. And we knew that if we did not come, no one else would. Tomo felt tears forming in his eyes again. He seemed to cry easily these days. 3 generations of suffering had left him empty, and now he was filling up with emotions he had forgotten existed. But the Kreth will return, he said. They will come back with more ships. They will want revenge. Yes, Yuna agreed. They will, and will you be here? Will you protect us? Yuna smiled. It was a fierce smile, full of determination. That is why I wanted to talk to you. I have sent a message to Earth. The 2nd and 3rd fleets are already on their way. By the time the Kreth arrive, we will have 400 warships in orbit around your world. Tomo gasped. 400 ships? It was more than he could imagine. But there is something else, Yuna said. We cannot protect every world in the galaxy. We cannot be everywhere at once. What we can do is make an example. We can show the Kreth and everyone else what happens when you attack people under our protection. Lieutenant Minji had been spending every day with the Valori, learning their culture and history. She was young and eager, and genuinely interested in understanding these people. The Valori children loved her, and she loved them back. One evening, she sat with Tomo on a hill overlooking the capital city. The twin moons were rising, casting silver light across the purple forests. Your people are so gentle, Minji said. You have never had war. You have never had violence. How did you survive for so long without weapons? Tomo thought carefully before answering. Before the Kreth came, we did not need weapons. Our world was peaceful. Our neighbors in space were peaceful. We believed that all intelligent species would naturally choose harmony over conflict. He sighed deeply. We were wrong. The galaxy is not peaceful. The galaxy is cruel. Species like the Kreth see kindness as weakness. They take what they want because they can. Minji nodded slowly. She understood. Humanity had learned the same lesson long ago. But now you are not alone, she said. You have us. Yes, and that is strange to us. We do not understand why you would risk so much for strangers. It goes against everything we thought we knew about the galaxy. Minji smiled. Maybe that is why we came. To show you that the galaxy can be different. That there can be species who protect instead of conquer. That kindness is not always weakness. Tomo looked at her with something like wonder. Your people are very strange. Yes, we know. Far away, in the depths of space, the Kreth Grand Fleet was gathering. Ships arrived from every corner of the Dominion. Destroyers and cruisers and battleships. Troop transports carrying millions of soldiers. Weapons platforms capable of cracking planets. Overlord Vethrak reviewed his forces and felt satisfied. The humans had surprised him once. They would not surprise him again. He had studied the reports from the survivors of the Tazara Prime battle. The human ships were tough, but not invincible. Their weapons were powerful, but primitive. They fought with discipline, but not creativity. The Kreth had numbers. The Kreth had experience. The Kreth had the fury of a wounded empire seeking revenge. Vethrak sent a message to his commanders. They would jump to Tazara Prime in 3 standard days. They would destroy every human ship in orbit. They would recapture the planet and execute every Valori who would welcome the invaders. And then they would find Earth. They would find this mysterious homeworld of the humans. And they would burn it to ash. On the unyielding dawn, Captain Dohi received a report from the scout ships. The Kreth fleet was assembling. It was larger than anything they had anticipated. She brought the report to Admiral Yuna in her quarters. The old woman read it carefully, her face showing no emotion. 2,000 ships, Dahi said. We will have 400. The odds are 5 to 1 against us. Yuna nodded slowly. I have seen worse odds. When? The Admiral smiled grimly. In the history books. Humanity has a long tradition of winning battles we should have lost. We have a saying on Earth. It is not the size of the dog in the fight. It is the size of the fight in the dog. Dahi frowned. I do not understand. What do dogs have to do with anything? Never mind. The point is this. The Kreth have more ships. But they have never faced an enemy like us. They do not know what we are willing to sacrifice. They do not know how far we will go to protect the people behind us. She stood up and walked to the window of her quarters. The stars shone cold and distant. Tell the crew to rest while they can. In 3 days, we fight. And we will show the Kreth exactly why the galaxy feared us enough to erase our existence from memory. President Taiwu sent another message from Earth. The 4th and 5th fleets were mobilizing. They would not arrive in time for the battle, but they would be ready to respond if things went wrong. He also sent a personal message to Admiral Yuna. It was short and simple. Hold the line. Show them who we are. And come home when it is done. Yuna read the message 3 times before putting it away. Home. Yes. She would like to see Earth again. She would like to walk under a blue sky and breathe real air and feel the sun on her face. But first, she had a job to do. The storm was coming, and humanity would be ready. The sky above Tazara Prime grew dark with ships. The Kreth Grand Fleet emerged from fold space in perfect formation. 2,000 warships spread across the orbital sphere like a metal curtain. They blocked out the stars. They blocked out the light of the twin suns. On the surface, the Valori looked up and felt their hope die. How could anyone fight against such a force? How could 70 ships? No, 400 ships now. How could they possibly survive? Elder Priest Tomo stood in the temple garden and watched the sky fill with enemies. He had seen this before. 3 generations ago, his grandfather had watched the first Kreth invasion from this same spot. History was repeating itself. The galaxy was cruel, and the cruel always won. But then he noticed something strange. The human soldiers around him were not panicking. They were calm. They were checking their weapons and talking to each other in low voices. Some of them were even smiling. Sergeant Hana walked past him, her rifle on her shoulder. "Why are you smiling?" Tomo asked. "There are 5 ships up there for every one of yours. You cannot possibly win." Hana stopped and looked at him. Her eyes were hard, but not unkind. "Elder Tomo," she said, "let me tell you something about humans. We have a very long history of being underestimated. And we have an even longer history of proving our enemies wrong." She walked on without another word. In orbit, Admiral Yuna stood on the bridge of the command ship Sun's Embrace. She had transferred her flag from the unyielding Dawn to give Captain Dohi room to command her own vessel. The battle ahead would need every captain thinking clearly. The Second Fleet had arrived 2 days ago. The Third Fleet had arrived yesterday. 400 human warships now held formation around Tessara Prime. They were outnumbered 5-1. They were outgunned by an even larger margin. They were exactly where they wanted to be. "Admiral," Lieutenant Minji reported, "the Kreth flagship is hailing us." Yuna nodded. "Put it through." The face of Overlord Vethrak appeared on the main screen. He was older than the other Kreth officers Yuna had seen, with scars covering his face and a cold intelligence in his eyes. "Human Commander," Vethrak said, "I offer you one chance to withdraw. Leave this system now. Return to whatever forgotten corner of the galaxy you came from, and the Dominion will not pursue you." Yuna considered his words carefully. Then she spoke. "Overlord Vethrak, I appreciate your offer. Now let me make one of my own. Turn your fleet around and leave Tessara Prime. Release all conquered peoples in your empire. Disband your military forces. If you do this, we will allow you to live in peace." Vethrak stared at her for a long moment. Then he began to laugh. It was an ugly sound, full of contempt. "You are insane. You have 400 ships. I have 2,000. Do you think you can defeat me?" Yuna shrugged. "I think we are going to find out." She cut the communication. "All ships," she announced on the fleet channel. "This is Admiral Yuna. Today, we face the largest enemy force in human history. Today, we fight for people who cannot fight for themselves. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity stands for." She paused and looked around her bridge at the young faces watching her. "Remember why we are here. Remember who we are protecting. And remember that every Valori child looking up at this sky is counting on us to win. Now, battle stations. And may fortune favor the brave." The Battle of Tessara Prime began at noon local time. The Kreth attacked with overwhelming force. They sent wave after wave of ships against the human formation. Plasma fire filled the space between the fleets. Explosions lit up the darkness like new stars being born. But the human ships did not break. They fought in ways the Kreth had never seen. They coordinated with impossible precision, moving as one body with 400 parts. When one ship was damaged, others moved to cover it. When one ship was destroyed, the rest closed the gap instantly. And their weapons. The Kreth had never faced anything like human weapons. Kinetic rounds punched through Kreth armor like it was not there. Nuclear missiles created expanding balls of fire that consumed entire squadrons. Directed energy beams cut through ships from kilometers away. But the Kreth had numbers. For every ship they lost, they had 3 more to take its place. Slowly, inevitably, the human line began to bend. Captain Dohe fought the unyielding Dawn like it was an extension of her own body. She had trained on simulators for years. She had memorized every tactical manual in the fleet library, but nothing had prepared her for the reality of battle. Around her, crew members worked with desperate efficiency. Damage reports came in from every deck. Casualty numbers climbed higher and higher. The ship was bleeding, but it was still fighting. "Captain," her tactical officer reported, "the medical frigate Spirit of Hope is under attack. 3 Kreth destroyers are targeting it. It cannot survive." Dahi looked at her display. The Spirit of Hope was carrying wounded from several ships. It was also carrying 200 Velori civilians who had been evacuated from the surface. The frigate was behind the main line. The Kreth destroyers had broken through and were hunting it like predators after wounded prey. Dahi did not hesitate. "Helm, intercept course. All ahead full. Captain, if we leave the line will hold. Those civilians will not move." The unyielding Dawn broke formation and accelerated toward the medical frigate. It was a destroyer, fast and deadly. It reached the Spirit of Hope just as the Kreth opened fire. Dahi put her ship between the enemy and the frigate. She took the hits that were meant for the unarmed vessel. Her ship shuddered and groaned as Kreth weapons tore into her armor. "Return fire. All weapons." The unyielding Dawn was wounded but not defeated. Its guns still worked. Its crew still fought. They destroyed 1 Kreth ship, then another. The 3rd destroyer scored a direct hit on the Dawn's engine section. The ship lurched violently. Alarms screamed throughout every corridor. "Engine room is gone," the damage control officer reported. "We have no propulsion." Dahi looked at the tactical display. The 3rd Kreth destroyer was coming around for another pass. The Spirit of Hope was trying to escape, but it was too slow. If the destroyer survived, it would finish what it started. Dahi made her decision. "Helm, ramming speed." The bridge went silent. "Captain, you heard me. Use the emergency thrusters. Put us in their path. We are going to stop that ship one way or another." The unyielding Dawn had no engines, but it had maneuvering thrusters. It had momentum. It had a captain who refused to let innocent people die. The human ship slammed into the Kreth destroyer at an angle. Both vessels crumpled from the impact. Explosions ripped through both ships. Debris scattered in all directions. The Spirit of Hope escaped. On the main bridge, Dahi was thrown from her chair. She felt bones break. She felt blood running down her face. She felt the ship dying around her. But she also felt satisfaction. She had done her duty. She had protected the people who needed protection. The battle raged on. On the surface, Sergeant Hana defended the refugee camp with everything she had. Kreth drop pods had made it through the orbital bombardment. Enemy soldiers were on the ground, hunting for Velori to kill. Hana had 30 Marines. The Kreth had 300 soldiers. The math was simple and terrible. "Fall back to the secondary position," she ordered. "Keep the civilians behind us. Do not let a single Kreth soldier through." Her Marines fought like demons. They used every trick humanity had learned in its long, violent history. They ambushed and retreated and ambushed again. They made the Kreth pay for every meter of ground. But they were losing. One by one, her Marines fell. The line grew thinner. The Kreth kept coming. A young Marine named Dongwu took a hit covering a group of Velori children. He went down hard and did not get up. Hana saw it happen from across the battlefield. She saw the Kreth soldiers advancing toward the crying children. She did not think. She just moved. Hannah crossed the killing ground in seconds. She grabbed Dongru's weapon and added it to her own. She stood between the children and the enemy, firing with both hands. "You want them?" she screamed at the Kreth. "Come through me first." The Kreth came. Hannah shot them down. More came. She shot them too. Her armor was cracked. Her body was bleeding from a dozen wounds. But she did not fall. 7 hours. She held that position for 7 hours. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found Hannah still standing. The ground around her was covered with fallen enemies. The children behind her were untouched. A medic rushed to help her. Hannah waved him off. The kids first. Always the kids first. Then she finally collapsed. In orbit, the tide was turning. The Kreth had lost 1,000 ships. The humans had lost 150. The numbers were still against them, but something was breaking in the Kreth fleet. They had never faced an enemy who fought this hard. They had never seen soldiers sacrifice themselves for strangers. They had never known that such dedication was possible. Admiral Yuna watched the Kreth flagship trying to retreat. She gave the order to pursue. "Overlord Vethrak, your fleet is broken. Your soldiers are fleeing. Surrender now, and we will treat you fairly. Continue to fight, and we will destroy you." There was a long pause. Then Vethrak's voice came back, weak and defeated. "We surrender." The Battle of Tazara Prime was over. On the surface, the Valori emerged from their shelters to find a sky clear of enemies. They found human soldiers helping their wounded. 1 year had passed since the Battle of Tazara Prime. The galaxy was still talking about it. Every species with access to communications knew the story now. The sleeping warriors had awakened. They had answered a call for help. They had defeated the Kreth Dominion in the largest space battle anyone had ever seen, and they had done it for strangers. Admiral Yuna sat in a conference room on the rebuilt space station above Tazara Prime. She was tired. She had been tired for months. Diplomacy, she had discovered, was more exhausting than battle. Representatives from 37 species sat around the long table. Some were peaceful peoples, like the Valori, who had lived in fear of predators for centuries. Others were former subjects of the Kreth, newly freed and uncertain about their future. All of them had come to meet humanity and ask the same question: "Will you protect us too?" Yuna stood and addressed the room. "Thank you all for coming. I know many of you have traveled great distances. I know many of you are afraid. You have lived in a galaxy where the strong prey on the weak, where help never comes, where hope is foolish." She paused and looked at the faces around the table. "That galaxy is over. Today, we create something new." She activated a holographic display. It showed a document written in 100 languages. The Galactic Protection Compact. Any species that signs this agreement commits to peaceful coexistence with all other members. In return, they receive the full protection of the United Earth Defense Force. An attack on one member is an attack on all members. A representative from a small, insect-like species raised a limb. "What do you want in return? What tribute do you demand? What territory do you claim?" Yuna smiled. It was a kind smile, patient and understanding. "Nothing. We want nothing. You keep your worlds, your resources, your governments. We ask only that you live in peace with your neighbors." The room erupted in confusion. Representatives spoke over each other in dozens of languages. Translators struggled to keep up. That is impossible. There must be a trick. No species helps without price. Yuna let them talk. She had expected this. Every species in the galaxy had been taught the same lesson by centuries of predation. Kindness was weakness. Help always came with chains attached. Finally, Elder Priest Tomo stood up. The room fell silent. Everyone knew who he was. He was the one who had summoned the humans. He was the one who had started everything. I asked the same questions 1 year ago, Tomo said. When the human soldiers first arrived, I fell to my knees before them. I expected them to be new masters. Instead, they helped me stand up. He looked around the room at the frightened, hopeful faces. I have spent this year living among humans. I have learned their history. They were once like us, peaceful and gentle. Then they became like the Kreth, violent and cruel. They nearly destroyed themselves. But they survived. They learned. They decided that their strength should be used to protect, not to conquer. He turned to face Yuna directly. I believe them. I trust them. I urge all of you to do the same. The vote was not unanimous. Some species were too afraid. Some could not let go of their suspicion. But 31 species signed the Galactic Protection Compact that day. It was the beginning of a new era. Captain, Dahi walked through the gardens of the Valori capital with a cane. Her injuries from the battle had been severe. The doctor said she would never fully recover. She did not care. She was alive. Her crew was alive. The people she had protected were alive. Lieutenant Minji walked beside her, pointing out different plants and explaining their significance in Valori culture. Minji had become the unofficial ambassador between humans and Valori. She spoke their language fluently now. She knew their songs and stories and history. You are happy here, Dahi observed. Minji nodded. I feel like I belong. Is that strange? I grew up on Earth, but this place feels like home. Not strange. Home is not always where you were born. Sometimes it is where you find your purpose. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Do you ever regret it? Minji asked. Ramming that ship? Almost dying? Dahi thought about the question carefully. No, I think about it every day. I think about my crew who died. I think about the pain and the fear. But I also think about the children on that medical frigate. I think about the lives we saved. And I know I would do it again. Minji smiled. You are very strange, Captain. Yes, I know. Humans often are. Across the galaxy, other beacons were activating in the ruins of an ancient temple on a desert world. A small furry creature discovered a metal object buried in the sand. When it touched the object, it began to glow. On an ocean planet, where the inhabitants had never seen land. A beacon that had rested on the seafloor for millennia suddenly came alive in the darkness between stars. Aboard a ship filled with refugees fleeing from raiders. Someone found an artifact in the cargo hold and whispered a desperate prayer. The signals reached Earth within hours. The Fourth Fleet began mobilizing. The Fifth Fleet followed. President Taiwu addressed the people of Earth from the steps of the global parliament. Our ancestors hoped that if other life existed in the universe, it would be peaceful and wise. Instead, we have found a galaxy full of fear and suffering. We have found species who have never known kindness, who have never been protected, who have never had hope. He paused and looked up at the stars. We cannot save everyone. We cannot be everywhere at once. But we can do something. We can show the galaxy that it does not have to be this way. We can prove that strength and compassion are not opposites. We can be the protectors we wished we had when we were young and afraid. To every species calling out in the darkness, we hear you. We are coming. Hold on. On Tessara Prime, Elder Priest Tomo watched the sunrise with Admiral Yuna. They had become unlikely friends over the past year. The old Valori and the tired human sat together on the temple steps, saying nothing, enjoying the peace. I have been thinking, Tomo said finally. About what? About your people. About why you are the way you are. I think I understand now. Yuna raised an eyebrow. Tell me. Tomo gathered his thoughts carefully. Your people almost destroyed themselves. You experienced suffering that most species cannot imagine. And instead of becoming bitter, instead of turning cruel, you decided that no one should ever suffer the way you did. Your history of violence became your motivation for peace. Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. Yes, that is close to the truth. We remember what it felt like to have no one come when we needed help. We remember the loneliness and the fear. And we swore that if we ever had the power to help others, we would use it. Every single time. Tomo reached out and touched her hand. It was an intimate gesture for the Valori, a sign of deep respect and affection. Your people are a gift to the galaxy, Admiral. I do not know if you are the sleeping warriors of legend or something else entirely, but I know that you have given us hope. And hope is the most valuable thing in the universe. Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes. She let them fall. Thank you, Elder Tomo. That means more than you know. They sat together and watched the twin suns climb higher into the sky. Somewhere above them, human ships were preparing to answer more calls. Somewhere across the galaxy, frightened people were discovering that they were not alone. The galaxy was changing. It would not happen overnight. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, more loss. The predator empires would not give up easily. The road ahead was long and difficult, but for the first time in a very long time, the future looked bright. Lieutenant Minji found them an hour later. She was carrying a datapad with urgent news. Admiral, we have received signals from 17 more worlds. Species I have never heard of. They are all asking for help. Yuna stood up slowly, feeling every one of her 62 years. Then we should answer them. All of them? At once? The Admiral smiled. It was a tired smile, but it was real. We will start with the most desperate and work our way through the list. That is what we do. That is who we are. She looked up at the sky one more time. We are humanity, and we answer when called. High above Tessara Prime, the fleet began to move. Ships jumped to distant stars, carrying soldiers and doctors and engineers. They carried food and medicine and hope. They carried the promise that no one would ever be alone again. And across the galaxy, in temples and caves and refugee camps, frightened people looked up at the sky and waited. Help was coming. For the first time in their lives, help was actually coming. The sleeping warriors had awakened, and they would never sleep again.